growing up on North Stradbroke Island, now I believe I saw a thing that JC did on you. You sort of were on the island, then you left. What happened there?
We were cut off from the mainland for 2 weeks straight. No barges. We had no speedboats or anything in those days. It was just all barges. And
basically, you guys were sort of like 20 years behind in time than the mainland nearly, with all the facilities and that, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. I just thought it was a dolphin. I didn't really take that much notice. It was so crystal clear, the water. They retreated, and actually I took another look, and what it was just a shark that had 2 fins, and he had his dorsal fin out, his tail fin, but it was like 2 dolphins long. For that rescue of that young girl that was unconscious for over 10 minutes. And then, he had to jump 20 feet off into the North Gorge and about a 6-foot southerly swell. And
because I know you're running out of land to build houses. What's the future for the youth there, you think? Welcome to the Green Room, your backstage pass to the world of surfing. I'm your host, surf MC and commentator Terry Tappa, diving into epic wins, crushing fails and wild stories with surfing's biggest names. So wax up, paddle out and join us in the Green Room, where the surf chat never goes flat. Today's guest, Russell Specht, I would call the surfing king of North Stradbroke Island. He surfs North Straddie, Minjerra Bar in all conditions, and that place has some of the biggest and most powerful waves in Queensland. The bloke has an intimate knowledge of the ocean, and more particularly of North Stradbroke Island. His Facebook profile says, surfer, carpenter, and surfing Indo since 76. My first time I saw Russell surf, I was 16, and the second time at North Stradbroke Island, I was at Gail Austin's Good Time Teams event. It was Miami board riders, Point Lookout board riders, and Gail Austin's Brisbane team. Yeah, that's right, a Brisbane team. Russell was in the final and he was taking off around Deadman's and riding double overhead waves past the pub at least 500 metres with plumes of spray, one backhand Rio after another, and his wife Jenny was waiting at the end of the boat ramp to drive him back to paddle back out at Deadman's. He destroyed wave after wave, and he still does 44 years later. Welcome to the Green Room, Russell Specht.
Thanks, Tap. Much appreciated.
Now, mate, growing up on North Stradbroke Island, now I believe I saw a thing that JC did on you. You sort of were on the island, then you left. What happened there?
There was a time when we spent 4 years, I think, actually on the island, and then my dad actually ended up with working for a big company, Brambles, I think, or something, and we spent 4 years in the suburbs of Brisbane, near Lang Park, actually,
Ouch.
Paddington, yeah. But I don't remember much of that. We're still on the island every school holidays and all that. But I still remember the time when he actually come home one afternoon and he said, we're moving back to the Stradbroke. And that was when Mum and Dad both started working when they opened up the Straddie Hotel, and they both worked as barman and barmaid. And there were times that, my goodness gracious, it was probably the best times of your life. No one there surfing, just my brother and I.
Wow, and how far does your family go back at Straddie there?
We go back probably about the mid-1800s or something like that.
Wow.
Because Colburn Avenue, which is in Mum's side,
yeah,
that's the main street into Victoria Point. That's named after my great-great-grandfather, I think, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So, I think the Durbridge family goes back a fair way there too, but that was when there was, no roads and stuff, and they used to haul stuff through sand tracks to make houses?
He used to actually just do, they had the mental asylum on the island, actually. It was like a quarantine area and everything like that, and he supplied food and cattle and that to the dunnage and everything, where everything was situated, and Point Lookout and Amity was sort of just little places to go on a weekend if you could get there, in those days, yeah.
And what, had electricity? No?
No, I grew up.
Phones?
I grew up when we went back to the island, we moved back to Point Lookout. That was around about 1963 or 4, somewhere there. We had no electricity, no power, just tank water. And I think in the 74 cyclone, forget which one, Wander, I think, we were cut off from the mainland for 2 weeks straight. No barges. We had no speedboats or anything in those days. It was just all barges, and sometimes the barge timetable just didn't operate because if someone had a carton there or something, the boys would get a little bit tipsy, and that was the end of that for the next day.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mate, that's what I believe on the island there. Like, people used to go shopping once a month. By the end of the month, all the diet was totally seafood, was it?
Well, I think it was most of the crew and most of us living up was mullet, Just mullet. I sort of like actually at the stage now where I look at mullet and I go, yeah, I've had enough of them. But yeah, it was a lot. You just go fishing and, we had no refrigeration, the old Kero fridge and everything like that. So you'd come home with half a dozen mullet, you'd be on the little lagoon, and my brother and I used to just dive in and catch them barehanded sort of thing, and straight home and straight into the frying pan. And you
got to eat them fresh, don't you, mullet?
Oh, mullet, yeah, especially the big ones on the island are good once they've been flushed out in the open ocean for about a week or a few days or something. But once they come out of the rivers and that, they're a bit sketchy, so they need open ocean sort of water to clean them out,
Wow, mate, that's an amazing, because basically you guys were sort of like 20 years behind in time than the mainland nearly with all the facilities and that, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, that didn't really start until the sort of like late 70s and the 80s and that. There was one strip of bitumen on the island they actually put down for a test, I remember, and I still remember it actually. It was only about 100 metres long, but that was the only time from Point Lookout to Amity Point and back to Dunwich. That was all just dirt roads. So every time you had lots of rain and everything was washed out. And so the most important thing, you never had a good car. You just had cars that were just, oh my God, and my dad being a mechanic, he was a mechanic at the mines on the island and everything like that. He was handy because he kept most of the cars going for everybody.
Wow. That's crazy, mate. And I, at the same time I was watching the first colour television pictures.
Yeah.
Well, now, mate. When did your surfing start, though?
My surfing started at Cylinder Beach because we were living straight in front of Cylinder Beach, and actually the guy Tony Durbridge, which is Bede Durbridge's grandfather. Him and another guy called, I can't remember his name at the moment, but anyway, we're living in his house, which was like 100, straight down, less than 100 metres, 75 metres to the beach. So we used to just go down after school, had the beach to ourselves, and if we saw someone on the beach, we were just a bit gobsmacked. We'd just going, who is that? Like, we never saw no one for years and years, and there was a couple of guys from Dunwich, Indigenous guys from Dunwich that I grew up with in the early days, and they used to come out on weekends, and we used to just leave our boards on Cylinder Headland. And I still remember after about 3 or 4 years of doing that, going down there one day, and this was the Mel days, and it was when Mel's, before his shortboard era come in, and my board was gone, and someone was in Cylinder out surfing the shore break on my board, and it didn't go down well.
I can imagine,
but we sorted it out, with a couple of the Indigenous boys. It's sort of like a little bit of I got it back really quick.
And so, what your first wave at Cylinder, because for those who don't know, Cylinder Headland is a beautiful, perfect right-hander, and it's, from 1 foot to as big as it gets?
Well, yeah, I've surfed it up to, 10 foot and over sort of thing, It's a bit... I've seen it as good as Kira, and I've surfed it as good as Kira, and I've got photos, in my stash at home that. But if the banks are right, it's such a fickle wave. It's everything's got to come in fruition sort of thing, because there's just so many. Yeah, but when it works, my goodness gracious God, it's sort of like and I've been lucky enough to have it with 1 or 2 of us in the water, and get a wave up the top of Deadman's and step off the pub. You're just dead legged. And I still remember one wave, actually, a session out there, probably must be 30 years ago, where I switch-footed on the takeoff and actually end up getting a barrel about halfway to the pub sort of thing and come out. And I could do it a lot in those days. I was sort of like I was a bit mixed up in the early days. I didn't know if I was natural or goofy footer. So I sort of like switch-footing on the early, but anyway, it worked.
And from those early days on the Mals, that was it. You were hooked, mate. It seems like there's so many people on the island that surfing is their life as well as just.
Well, yeah, Tap, because there was nothing to do unless you either fished or you surfed. In the early days, like all the older crew looked down on us as we're talking the late '60s here, early '70s sort of thing. As we started. And the old crew just looked at us as, get a real job sort of thing and all the rest of it, because we used to do all our spare time was either the waves weren't on, you were fishing, if and the waves were good, you were surfing. And once you started getting better, and I was just one of those, my brother and I just to just push it, and all of a sudden, I just sort of like started getting the hang of it. And, once the drop down to shortboards and Revolution and everything like that, I got picked up by, I think, guy Eric Cowley from Redcliffe, actually, was doing boards up there, and he was the one that started the North Shore Board Riders. So I ended up involved with all them in the early days, and probably the biggest shock was actually getting taken away to a round of the Queensland titles, and just lucky enough that was held at Perfect Cura. So, yeah, after a second in the juniors, I was pretty stoked.
So, mate, did you, like, I know, you live on the island, so travelling's a bit hard. Did you ever have ambitions to go, like, because you surf at a very high level, did you ever have ambitions to go on the tour or anything like that?
Strange when you say that, Tap. That's probably one thing I've always regretted, not having to go. But then I have to throw that back to I made a lot of Queensland teams and sort of like represented Queensland with the Nationals, and we went to I think we had the unbeatable Queensland team back about 74 or somewhere like that. I think there's a picture still up. We're actually all hopping on a TAA plane or something, leaving Brisbane or Coolangatta or something. But and we got confronted with Middleton in
Dribbleton
in South Australia. And being Queensland boys and so used to, it was the only wave I've ever gone where you take off 300 metres out the beach and go left and right 4 or 5 different times and get on the beach and you stand there and go, I've just gone straight the whole way. And sort of like, I never got my head around that. And halfway through that contest, Tony Elgin, Doris, actually got the shits with it. And Peter McCabe teamed up with him and stole him from the contest. And they ended up going to Bali, actually. And, it was 75 because they went to Bali just after that contest. And I was left down there to actually watch the Queensland team deteriorate. And I think Terry Fitzgerald won the Australian title that year. And we had a team that consisted of MP, Rabbit, PT, my God.
Legendary team, mate.
It was a volatile team, and there was Doris, myself, Daryl Parkinson, Peter Harris. There was everyone was in there. Like it's just a classic team, and we went down as the odds-on favourite. We come back with the tail between our legs. I think none of us got adapted to the conditions very well.
Oh wow! Now, mate, you're a carpenter by trade. Did you do your apprenticeship on the island, or?
Yeah, I did, Tap. I've done my apprenticeship on the island. I finished school on a Friday and started my apprenticeship on a Monday. And I finished the apprenticeship by the time I was just turned 18 and I'd finished it.
Wow. Now, mate, how hard is it to get a carpenter on the island when it's pumping?
That's one thing a lot of people on the island I've accepted over the years. If the waves are on, the tradies aren't. There's no one there. Full
They're
stop.
all at Point Lookout or at Cylinders or wherever.
Been through situations where there's job sites completely shut down. And if you go up, I've even seen Energex crews wanting to put power onto a house and come up to the headland at Main and put it over their loudspeaker. Specky, can you come in here and give me the key to the house so I can put the power on, So we've been through so much and you get deliveries or something like that. Yeah. And there's no one there, or they don't know where to actually put it on what job. And, and the boys come up and they start beeping the horn and carrying on, or tell one of the crew that paddle out. But it's the funniest thing you ever seen. When the waves are on, we'll have doctors, everybody, like even right down to the police go surfing, not in their one duty, but, if they're off duty, but everybody just juggles their days around. I think it's very similar down the Gold Coast and many other places too.
Yeah, but a bit different there. You've got that isolated island and everybody knows everybody, don't they?
Oh, you can't escape, so they know where you're done. There's no point in coming back to the job or making excuses. They just know, I just lay it on, where I just tell them straight out, right, if the waves come, you're not going to have anything happening for a few days until they last.
Oh, mate. Now, you said you've been surfing Indo since 76. Mate, how was it now to compare? Like, how do you go back now, or do you just mainly start with the Ments and that now? You don't go to Bali, that sort of thing now?
I'm heading back to Bali in about 4 or 5 weeks' time, actually, for the first time since COVID struck. I'm in for a shock, but I've been chatting to a lot of the crew because I've been lucky enough, Tap, that even when I went across there in 76, I think I took $200 spending money, and I spent 2.5 months there, and I come back with $120 in spending money.
$80 for 2.5 months.
Yeah, and it was just sort of like, and I ran into Doris over there, like they were shooting tubular swells and all those, and everything, and I knew about Padang at the times, but they wouldn't take me down there, so I was a bit peeved about that. But we had to walk in the old way into Ilu, and it was. And when people get over there now and they've got bottled water and everything. You try drinking a hot Fanta or a coconut after you've been in the water for 4 or 5 hours and having to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours or 3 hours by the time you got back to your hotel. You were staying at Cooteralegi, and there was no accommodation up at Ulu or anything. And the crowd factor was non-existent in them days. I remember surfing, the first surf at Ulu I think I had was, there was the guy I was with, but he was a bit hesitant because it was about 8 foot plus, and there was another American guy that walked over to me, and it was just him and I. But anyway, you learn from your mistakes. So the second wave, I think I got the first wave, got a good barrel and come out of that, paddled back out. I got a bit cocky and paddled a few feet up further, and the next wave I just slid down the face of about an 8 footer, and the leg rope snapped straight into the cliffs. And I was sort of going, well, this is going to be an experience, but somehow I managed to body surf a wave all the way to about 2 metres away from the cliff, and I grabbed my board before it would have got smashed into the cliff. And after that, it really hasn't scared me, except when it gets over the 10 to 12 foot and outside corner market. That's when it's another different dimension when it gets out there.
But you're out there in Cyclone Alfred as well recently, mate. If you don't mind me asking, how old? I know you're older than me, so how old are you now?
I'm 68, Tap. I turned 68 a month ago.
Wow, that's incredible, the size of the waves. And what's your key to fitness, mate? What's your key? Is it eating well, or do you exercise besides surfing, or?
I've been doing probably for the last 25 years, I do a good routine of a morning, Tap, and I sort of like the most important thing is to stay active, but I go through a routine every morning where I do a lot of push-ups, a lot of chin-ups, a bit of yoga, stretching and everything like that, but I just do that religiously day after day, 7 days a week, and then push bike riding and just being mobile, like I'm just retired now, and at Christmas time I'm sort of like not working, but I'm really enjoying it because I'm getting more time in the water now than I've had for a while. And you just got to stay active. I've watched so many of my friends that I grew up with that have gone past it and haven't surfed for the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I know. I hate saying that.
And I think you can relate to that too, Tap. So many of our era have just gone the too hard basket, and, you don't surf as good as you were,
of course
10 years ago or 20 years ago. But I don't bash myself up about it. I have days out there where, you have a couple of face plants, or you go looking for a couple of Ugari unintentionally, but you just shrug it over, and, you don't beat yourself up about it. That's the most important. Every now and then you get a couple you can open up on, and it all clicks, and you go, hey, still doing it. That's all that matters.
Now, mate, I was talking to you once over at Straddie. Now, you've had a bit of a sniff around the Great Barrier Reef. Is that true, that you've done a bit of exploring up there?
I've only been out to Lady Musgrave and Lady Elliot Island, but we got a bit bummed, actually. We had a big southerly change come through, and it just sort of blew us out. But we caught a lot of fish. That was all. But Jody Perry tried to get me out there just at the end of COVID, actually. And I know Jody's actually knows the Great Barrier Reef really well, but it's just the logistics out there. Once you're out in the open ocean like that, it's a bit like the Mentawais. You got no protection from everywhere, and you've just got to ride all the wind and everything. If you can see it like a window coming and everything like that, that's the way to do it.
Now, mate, Straddie, it is an island paradise. Every time I go over there, it's just like, wow, it's just so beautiful. What's your favourite wave there? Is it cylinders or is it point lookout? But you're a goofy foot, I must say. He's a goofy foot.
Oh, without a doubt, Main Beach, Tap, because I actually have always looked at Main Beach as, it's the simple way I look at Main Beach. It's very similar to sort of D-Bar. It's a wave magnet. It picks up the most swell on the island, and it's generally a foot or two bigger than what D-Bar is. But it's also, it's like a beach break on steroids, I call it, because even a 3 to 4 foot day at Main Beach is sort of like got the impact of like a 5 to 5 foot, 6 foot day at D-Bar. And that's because it's just coming out of, we stick out about an extra 20 Ks out in the ocean or something. Well, not 20 Ks, but about a few Ks out in the ocean. And we pick up everything from the south direction and, from the east-northeast direction too. So, and we cop some good swells, when the Gold Coast is really tiny, we'll still be surfing head-high waves.
That might be it, because I know the power there is crazy at Maine. And that's probably could explain why a lot of Straddie surfers that go so good in Hawaii, because that power is it reminds me of just like, the round off the wall and all that, the power there.
It's It's true, Tap. There's no question. I think, growing up at and I sort of like, if I had $1 for every surf I've had on the island, I'd be very comfortable. But the sheer waves you get there, you can get anything from even about, a month ago, 3 weeks ago, we had a session at Maine, and it just looked like you were actually at Indo, it was like 6-7 foot sort of thing and just running for about 200 metres left-handers.
Oh, I saw some of that footage that you put up. That was nuts.
It was just insane, and that was a Saturday, and it was just one of those days where the local crew were on song, and we had more local crew in the water instead of tourists, and it was just everybody was having a chat in between waves. We had a little system organised where whoever had the last wave sat down there, and there was no drama. We had a few Argentinians out in the water, but they got put in their place pretty quick.
Mate, that makes me laugh. Murray Burton told me a little story about you, about everybody had their number at Macaroni's or something, and he said, "Oh, don't paddle past Muzzer," and said, "Oh, don't worry, mate, you got the next one," and nearly took Muzzer out. He reckons that your eyes roll back like a white pointer, mate, roll back in the head when there's a good wave.
Oh, Murray still picks on me about there's a couple of times out in the men's there, I think. But the worst one, Murray always still he won't let it go. This goes on from 1993, mind you. Really good day at Lance's Left, and it was in the 8-foot range, and there was a big crew of us, we were all on a boat, and there was no one around in those days because this was an exploration time with Surfing Life magazine. And so I lost count of how many waves I had. But anyway, as I paddled back up, Murray said, "Come on, get down the end of the line," because it was a sponsored trip by Murray, and he's paying the whole lot. And anyway, the set started rolling through, and I couldn't help myself. I just kept paddling. And Murray was screaming at me as I paddled past him, and I'm saying, no, it's your wave, Murray, you go. And so anyway, it was just like a bomb set, in the 8-foot plus range come through, and I just couldn't help myself. I turned around and spun and just launched myself into it, and Murray's screaming at me, and I'm still not forgiven now. 33 years later. You'll never forget it.
Well, he brought it up with me.
Yeah.
I said, I'm having a chat to Russ, and he goes,
Yeah, there's another time I think Macca's actually, we surfed, we left with Martin Daly and all the Surfing Life crew and everything, and it was Pete Morrison. There's a good crew of us on board, and it was this when the men's got, probably the first time I got really photographed, and we left Jakarta and come up through the bottom, and we surfed in Gano, that island out in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, it was about 6 to 8 feet, and Martin sort of said, so we stopped off, and everybody piles out of the boat, and, it was 6 to 8 feet here, right? There was no question there, but after about a half an hour, everybody's getting a few waves, and, there's a few wipeouts and a few floggings going down. Then all of a sudden we had this set come through that was at about 12 to 15 foot that took everyone out of the equation, and I actually got annihilated. I was probably sitting out the furthest and took an absolute worst flogging I've ever had in my life. I still remember it actually, because it was a situation where you had no way you could duck dive it, and I ended up just diving under the water as the reef drained, and my board just went bang and gone, and I had the leg rope hanging off my leg, and then the next wave was even bigger, and so I was more or less swimming directly to Africa trying to get under this set, which I did, and by that time I was probably 150 metres off the reef in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Wow. And all I see was Martin Daly and the tender come out with a big grin on his face going, ha. And I was the only one left in the water because everyone else got washed in the white water, but I was actually just sitting there as shark bait in the middle of the Indian Ocean just going, get me out of here. And then after that, what I'm getting at, Tap, is after that anyway, we had a big day when we were travelling up north, and anyway, Martin says to me, he says, oh, well, look, I was probably one of the oldest guys surfing there because Murray used to always take me along as a bit of a set the pace for the younger crew, because some of the younger crew is always a bit tentative actually when we get to reef breaks. And so Martin says, I'm taking you to a left-hander like Kura tomorrow, Specky, and I'm going, oh, yeah, sure, sure. And the next morning, after Martin and I stayed up till about 3 o'clock in the morning as we steaming through, I woke up to probably 4 to 6 foot macas, just pristine perfection offshore. And there was one poor guy out there, I don't know, I just jumped off the boat and nothing, I don't know, Tappa just, I couldn't even be friendly.
The shark eyes, mate. The white pointer roll back.
The white pointer had popped out. He just went, and after a couple of waves, actually half the boat just jumped out and was out in the water with us. So it was pretty amazing, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Mate, speaking of sharks, mate, you've told me a few stories, mate. The thing is, North Stradbroke Island, it is a beautiful place, but it is wild. And with that wild comes a few of those blokes in the grey suits, mate. You've had quite a few encounters. In fact, once I brought this bird over that I was actually seeing at the time, and she's come over with me to North Straddie, and we've had a chat to you, and I mentioned something about, and next thing you've told her the story that about the one with the board, the top. And I'm going, thanks, Russ. She was coming out for a surf, but mate, tell it. Mate, you got to keep your eyes open there, haven't you?
It's actually something. How do you put it? I do not. I have a really healthy respect for sharks, and growing up on the island, you have to, because compared to the Gold Coast or the North Coast or anything like that, we see sharks 2 or 3 times, maybe more a week. And I'm at a stage where over the years, you're sort of like, the ones about, say, this 2 metre range and under, I don't seem to worry about. But once they start getting up into the 8 foot plus range, or the 2.5, 3 metre range, you take a healthy respect and generally retreat. I watched my good friend Brucey Lawler lose a leg beside me back in 73, and ever since then, when you see that happen, 20 metres away from you, you tend to know what they're capable of and know when your time's up. And even going back to that day, and Bruce and I have spoken about this in depth a couple of times, I sat out there in the swimming gorge, not in the swimming gorge, but out in front of the clubhouse straight off Main Beach, and we were probably out there. It was an August day, so there was a bit of tail on the water, there's no question there. But we were probably out there, and there was no leg ropes in those days, so we had no leg ropes. Bruce took off on a wave and wiped out, had a swim probably of 150 metres, 200 metres. I sat out there and got another wave and sat out there by myself. Anyway, by the time Bruce got his board, went to the beach, had to walk over and back out and come out through the swimming gorge again because there was a bit of size in it. And when he paddled out, there was another set coming, and he was really just got out there. And I yelled out to him, I said, "Do you want it?" And he says, "No, I'm too wasted from the swim." So when I took the wave and left him, as I was paddling back out about 20 metres in front of him, I just seen Bruce get hit from this shark from underneath and just go flying about 10 metres across the water, a metre out of the water. At the time, he still had both legs then, but as soon as he hit the water, that shark was on him so quick. And the only thing that saved him, it popped his foot off and sort of grabbed him by the leg and just slithered down.
Whoa.
And just popped his foot, and we both come eyeball to eyeball. And when the water turned red, and being 15 at the time...
So you're only 15 then?
I was only 15, Tappa, and
Wow.
I had no comprehension of what was happening. And I still remember watching it all go down, and Bruce, as he popped up when I thought he was gone, he popped up and the water just erupted in red. And then I seen the shark fin, very similar to what Mickey Fanning had happened at J Bay. It was just it was so strange. It was so similar to that. And then we were lucky enough that probably about another 70 metres out further, there was a couple of clubbies out in the old double ski, and they'd seen it too, and they just yelled out to me as they come paddling in, just get the hell out of it. I was on a 5'8" surfboard trying to still come to terms with how am I going to paddle into this to grab Bruce to try and get him 100 metres back to the beach.
Yeah. And
it still swims with me. And as Bruce and I have both said, the shark stalked me for like 10, 15 minutes while Bruce was missing, and me taking that wave and leaving Bruce there, it wasn't the way it was supposed to happen. So
yeah, wow.
I've lived with that my whole life with Bruce, and we both know it was like that. So extraordinary.
But but I suppose that's why you've got the healthy respect, and you've told me once you actually in the gorge and you had put your board down like straight like that.
That was 2010. I probably had the biggest scare I've ever had with, we were surfing a perfect crystal clear day at Main Beach. The watercolour was perfect. The offshore winds, 3-4 foot waves, just lovely. And anyway, a couple of the guys, there's only about 3 or 4 of us in the water, and a couple of guys about 20 or 30 metres down the beach yelled out, and I looked down and I actually I just thought it was a dolphin. I didn't really take that much notice. It was so crystal clear, the water. But they retreated, and actually I took another look, and what it was just a shark that had 2 fins, and he had his dorsal fin out, his tail fin, but it was like 2 dolphins long. And
Wow.
then I had a little meltdown.
As you would.
As you do. And as he swam towards me, I sort of like, and he was coming from the beach side of me sort of thing, so I couldn't just paddle straight towards him. I sort of laid down on the board and sort of like just watching him go, oh my God. And he went underneath me and went up towards the swimming gorge. And I thought, sigh of relief and everything. And he only went about 15 metres away. Then he just did a U-turn and then just turned around with speed and sort of like lifted his dorsal fin, come up out of the water. And then I just sort of like, all these things, I still remember it clearly. Tappa, how am I going to explain this one to Jenny if I survive? And this thing come at me, and the last second, I just stood on the tail of my board and just said, "You're going to have to eat this first."
Yeah.
And as it come, I could have brushed him. As it come up to me, he just couldn't see what was going to hit. So he did a big U-turn and just sprayed me with water, and I just melted as he sort of he went off down the beach. And by that time, a couple of people up in the headland had seen it. One of the lifeguards had seen it on the beach, and I stayed out there and just sort of caught the next wave in and a bit shook up and everything, and walked up to the beach and just sat under the pandanus tree going, am I still alive? I don't believe it happened. And
Wow.
no one even, I still don't believe it to this day. It was very similar to what Mick had, but it was just in a whole different context where I watched him come, go, and then come back with speed where I thought it was just all over. And I've had a couple other close ones where I've been quickly moved my leg, when I've been sitting on my board and sort of had a little, someone's had a grab at it, and I've actually been quick enough to get the leg out of the way and lost his line of attack.
But in saying that, it's not every day, is it?
No. You spread this out over 30 years.
Yeah, well, you spent a little bit of time in the water over there, mate.
Well, I think I've spent more than anyone.
Well, I reckon I know that because I've been out surfing one day. There was only about half a dozen of us out at Point Lookout, and you're sitting there, and next thing you've paddled 5 metres to the left. Bang, there's this big set. Next thing you've got back out, you paddled 5 metres the other way. There's the set again. I'm going, what the? He just paddles a little bit, and there it is. But that's, I suppose, from years of you just reading the ocean there, would it be?
Well, there's no question, I do. I must admit, though, it's not working as much as it used to as I've got older. A few of the young crew on the, but we've got a really good crew on the island at the moment, and watch what we've come out of the island over the,
Yeah.
I ribbed it into Kelly Slater a couple of times, how, you look at places like Hawaii, where the calibre of guys come out of there sort of thing, but when you put it on a per capita basis and you look at how it all works and everything like that, the amount of guys we've had on the CT, and when you look at Bede and Ethan.
And even Ethan's mum, for that matter, Helen.
And Helen too, and I grew up with Helen and surfed her from, the early days and everything, and she was such a good surfer in her own right, Tap.
Yeah.
She was insane. But it goes back to something where you said that at the intro, where you said, because I remember that contest actually we had with Gail Austin.
Oh, yeah, that was a joke.
And it was, we had a good cyclone swell come down. And
Yeah.
I think I got disqualified because Gail didn't like me getting picked up by Jenny in the car.
Well, I was in the junior final, right?
Oh, yep.
And I got, there was Dave Smith from Straddie and another bloke from Straddie in the final. We surfed out the back because and Brizzo and Wolfies, they surfed the whitewash reforms on the inside. And, there's no way, if my mates saw that I surfed that, I would have had bagged the hell out of. But, I think it was best 4 waves, and I think I only got 2 out the back. So I got best wave of the juniors. But the same thing, mate, I watched that final. It was you first and Daylight second.
Oh, I think I was riding a twin fin even at the time. I don't know. I can't remember. But I do know we actually got beaten by Brisbane. And
Yes, so did we.
And it's something this is really important, Tap, because ever since that contest, And I wasn't worried about my results. I was happy with how they went and everything. But I've never got over the fact that Brisbane beat us. And
Yes.
I couldn't believe our crew. And I paid them out. Then I made this pact with myself, and where I said, there's no question in 20 years' time we're going to get a team together and get a crew of guys together that can hold our own against the Gold Coast, because we kept losing so many of our guys to Snapper would come up, and we'd end up losing them. And watching Bede come up through the ranks and everything like that, and seeing our Point Lookout board riders has done in the ABB and many contests since, and we won our first Straddie Assault in 2000. I think 2000, and Helen was still surfing for us then. And it was just the best buzz, the best feeling to turn that around and beat all the clubs from Noosa to Labar, Byron.
Mate, Point Lookout board riders, when did that start?
72.
72. And were you part of that, sort of getting it all together?
I was as a junior then, but I was just sort of like, I wasn't in any of the positions or anything, but it was mostly I think it was just the older guys actually just wanted an excuse to go and drink a keg on a Sunday afternoon.
Like you do.
And that's how when I started in the contest, like in 72 on, I was sort of like a joined North Shore, because you had to be affiliated with Surfing Queensland to get a start in any of the Queensland teams and everything. So I was I was a member of North Shore and a member of Point Lookout, but I would never surf for North Shore in any contest or anything against Point Lookout, never.
Mate, it's amazing. Like you've got Bede, like how well Bede did, and Helen, and now Ethan, mate. Mate, how do you reckon Ethan's going to go? You reckon he's got a world title in him?
Without a doubt, Tap. Tony, just before he went back to Indo last week, we were sitting up at his place having a cup of coffee and just talking the talk, and we both said this has got to be his year, because if he doesn't, the longer it goes on, I just don't want to see him do a PT, as you say, and come second 3 times. He's already come second once. There's only one way to go now, and I just like to see these wave pool events, and I don't know, he does well on them, but he's such an all-round surfer. There's no question. He can take on anything from 10 to 15 foot sunset, and I'm probably disappointed they haven't got a sunset sort of like...
It's a shame there's no Triple Crown anymore, eh?
Well, it just sort of defies a bit of logic, and I don't know the reasoning why, because it's sort of a good backup for all the Hawaiian guys to get a start and everything like that. But the way with surfing and everything is at the moment, it's all about sponsorships and everybody paying their way and everybody, making money out of it and everything like that. And what they're doing now is, bringing the final back to Cloudbreak, I think is one of the best ideas that WSL have done in the last few years. Having it at Trestles it was fair enough, but my goodness gracious, there's nothing like watching Pipe make it. Pipe was the crescendo of the whole lot, over the
And it
years.
sort of tests the surfer. Like, I find, like, for some of these kids that are just qualified, your first event after surfing little grovelly beach breaks, you're at Pipe. That's a bit of a shock to the system.
There's no question there, Tap. I've never surfed Hawaii or anything. I've never been there, but that's another story. But anyway, watching these kids and that, they grow up in them sort of like beach breaks. But, when they go over to Hawaii, you're sort of like, guys have been going to Hawaii 2 or 3 years and they break out into the contest and everything and do the whole lot and find they can do well. Once they get over the Hawaiian experience and they get confident, then it's only time. And that's what, Ethan's had. I think before he actually made the CT, he probably spent, 4 seasons there since 15 or something. So
that's hectic.
He's done his hard yards. And even when Ethan's at home, Ethan's got his brother Curtis.
Great surfer too.
Who, as you've seen before, he's, and I think Justin Gain put up something in Pulse Surf that surprised me. He put up one of those videos of Ethan surfing as a goofy foot. And when I saw it, I actually thought it was Curtis. And I touched, we were chatting, just texting each other, and I said, that just looks like Curtis on the left, that I see and surf every day. I was only surfing with him a couple of days ago at Maine. And it's quite extraordinary because Ethan comes home to relax, but then him and his brother go down the beach there with a jet ski, and they'll do the most hardcore training for days on end, away from all the limelight, all the crew, everyone. So he's got a pretty good backup there when he goes and surfs with his brother, because his brother can hammer it up big time.
Yeah, well, who's that, mate? Like, you're the older generation of surfers at Point Lookout. Who are like the next generation down, the guys that really send it out there?
We've got the Jenners at the moment, the whole Jenner family. We've got Zany, Ash and Jai. They're doing really well. And the best part about it too, Tap, is they're all professional lifeguards now. They've come through our board riders club, and it's sort of like a pathway now to become a professional lifeguard. And the idea of that there, and, we have a really good rapport with the professional lifeguards and the volunteers on the weekends, which been in a small community. We've had differences over the years, but I think that's happened on every beach in Australia. But now it's all turned around, and the hierarchy of the lifeguards now has given our guys a pathway. And when you actually learn to surf on the island and growing up with the surf, there's no one more experienced in the conditions of what's going on and how it's going on. Like, we had a rescue there just before Christmas where I pulled up at the beach and it was 9:15, and Riley, one of the young lifeguards on the island, has come through our board riders club, good surfer. They're all good surfers. He actually just said, can you ride shotgun, Russ? I've got to go out there and save these guys. So by the time he's grabbed the vehicle, gone down the beach, put the rescue board in the water to go and rescue this, there was 2 other people starting to get swept away. We had a southerly swell, which you've seen it in action.
Yeah, just drags everything around.
And the current starting to drag everyone out, and we had people on the back bank that didn't know what they were doing, and we actually found out it was a pupil-free day, so we had everybody from Brisbane over for the day, and it was mayhem, raining. So I actually helped with my phone, and sort of while Riley's actually, and I rang up a couple of the lifeguards and found out that no one was answering their phone. It was their day off. So I rang my nephew up, who was parked in Wellington Point in Brisbane, and Logan answered the phone. I said to Logan, I says, can you give a few crew the ring here? So actually, to cut a long story short, Logan rang up from Wellington Point and coordinated all the other guys. He got hold of everybody else. And when all the boys, within 10 minutes, we had everybody down there. And I think Riley had saved 6 people before 9:05.
Wow, that's intense.
And then then the guys come down, the Jenner brothers come down, and they grabbed one of the 4-wheel drives with the speaker on it and sort of like told everybody to get out of the water. Then the boys just took control there and put up red flags and just stopped, got everybody out of the water to just have a regroup, because it was just, the tide was running out and it was just pandemonium, raining everywhere. It was just an inexperience. Once someone's in the water, someone else follows, and it's like when you do your surf reports, Tap.
Yeah.
If when in doubt, don't go out.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
That's it. Mate, well, one of your nephews did a rescue, had to leap from the cliff, wasn't it?
That's Logan, yeah. Logan's very gifted. He's
built like a brick,
yeah, he
what do you call it? Whoa.
He does a lot of training and everything, but Logan's a good chap, because ever since he's been small, he's sort of like, I used to grab him every afternoon after school, him and his brother Nathan, and I'd take him surfing every afternoon, and the boys learnt every little trick that I know over the years. They've been everywhere, and I've jumped up in cyclone swells up the top of Deadmans, and and I've been scared myself, then I'm worried about the boys are only 12 and 13, and they must be feeling a bit light,
Yeah.
And Mum's roused on me a few times. But anyway, what they've both done now is Logan sort of like, he done an apprenticeship with us and everything, and then he left and went back into being a lifeguard, and he sort of set the precedent now with another guy, Mitchie Yates, on the island, and they're both guys that have come through our board riders club. So that started the chain reaction of other guys coming through there now. So we've probably got, I think, six lifeguards now.
And it gives them employment as well on the island, because employment's pretty hard, isn't it?
And that's exactly right. The only employment on the island's actually, coffee shops, working at, the restaurants, or, being a tradie,
Or a fisherman.
Or fishermen, yeah. Well, everything's sort of fading out. There's a lot of tradies and that, it's still the same thing. But Logan's done a couple of amazing rescues. He's actually got won awards where they haven't even given it to anyone else in Australia yet, like for that rescue of that young girl that was unconscious for over 10 minutes. And then, he had to jump 20 feet off into the North Gorge and about a 6-foot southerly swell, and coordinate a jet ski to come in there where it couldn't even turn around. It had to do a 3-point turn in 6-foot waves coming in, and he got the little unconscious girl on the back of the jet ski and started performing CPR, and they had to run out through the broken waves of whitewater with rocks, 80 foot high either side of them. And the poor driver was probably the most rattled I've ever seen anyone, because he'd never experienced anything like that. And so Logan was talking him through driving the jet ski
and resuscitating
and doing CPR on the young little girl.
Wow.
And then when they landed on the beach, she was unconscious for another 7 or 8 minutes more, and they finally got a pulse, and then they sent a helicopter over, and it was just pure luck that they sent over a doctor with a helicopter, and miraculously they got a pulse back and got her breathing again. Then they flew her straight to the hospital, and she's 100% perfect recovery, no brain damage, no nothing.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. And it's great to see, because, to be honest, nobody would know those waters better than the local surfers, because they're in there, 7 days a week, basically.
No question, Tap, because even that day when that happened, Logan and I were on Cylinder Headland, and I was going to go for a surf, and Logan said, yeah, I'll catch you. I'm just going to go and get a coffee and I'll see you out there. So I come in probably 30 minutes later, 35 minutes later. It was just a quick get a couple of waves and get out again. It was not very good. And I couldn't work out where Logan was. And when I drove up the top there, I seen his car parked on the walkway to the gorge walk. And I thought, that's strange. And then I drove down to Main Beach, and as I pulled up on Main Beach, I was the only car there. And that's when I seen the jet ski just come up and land about 15 feet above into the dry sand. Mm-hmm. And I seen Logan pick up the little girl on the back, which I thought was a mannequin at the time. And, but then again, it was a coordination of everything, because I know the captain of the Lifesaving Club really well, and, him and I were onto it. Then we had fireys and police and ambulances and everything. And it was just, everything clicked into gear. It was just such good coordination between everybody.
Well, mate, it's an amazing community, North Stradbroke Island. And that's what, like people always go, what great people are, but it's like a small country town. Everybody always says g'day. Doesn't matter, like Bede will go out of his way to say g'day to me anywhere, even now though he's living down here most of the time. But where do you see the community at North Stradbroke going? Because I know you're running out of land to build houses as such. Like, what's the future for the youth there, you think?
That's a hard one, though, because what's happened, and it's happened all across the east coast of Australia, or probably the whole coastline of Australia, the sheer price of real estate has just gone to another level now. And what we're losing over there now is our younger generation coming up that have got no way they can afford to buy a block of dirt, unless they do it in sort of like...
Houses are millions and millions of dollars, aren't they?
The price of an average house at Point Lookout is the 1.5, and that's getting you nothing. You go everywhere from there up to 7 or 8.
Wow.
And, and most of the young crew now are living with mum and dad, and they're sort of like just hanging on until mum and dad fade away in 30 years' time or so. And so it's really difficult for the young crew. And it's the same as the Indigenous crew on the island. They've got land rights, but they're still in the sense of everything's still in the unknown category at the moment. The Redlands City Council is our governing body, and they're trying to do a good way around it, but they won't release land or anything over there, because at the moment there's sort of like, it will happen, but they're so bogged down with red tape, this red tape fiasco that goes on and on. They've been talking about releasing land for, I think, 15 years, and they're no closer to what they were 15 years ago.
And then you got the Airbnb thing on top of it.
Well, that happens too, and a lot of crew are doing that, which is understandable. People can rent half their house out. Now we've got all this, and the biggest one I like to say, this is straight to the federal government. When they bring student visas in, or sort of backpacker visas into Australia, there used to be a situation where you had to go out to a farm and do some farm work, or they call it remote work or something.
Yeah.
Remote. Well, they've classified Stradbroke now as a remote area. So we have this contingent on the island now that has taken up all the jobs in all the coffee shops and all the restaurants, in the hotel, that talk a whole different language to us, and I've got no offence for what they're doing and everything, but it's wrong where they're living the dream, camping in vans on the headlands and everything like that. I've gone to the local member and brought him up with that. Yeah. They've put signs up, this is under surveillance, but they don't do anything else about it. And it's the same thing happening down here with you guys. I saw it down at, top of Greenmount Hill this morning. I've seen it happen at D-Bar, and I don't know. And I think the federal government, they part of these crew coming in here on a 1 year visa should go out and pick fruit on the farms as part of their deal to help the economy, not come to a place like Stradbroke. And they've got their own little social media connections where they're all talking to their mates, oh, come here, come here, come here. So the other day I've had surfs out at home where I've been probably 2 of us in the water are locals and there's 15 Argentinians in the water. Please explain.
Yeah, there are some good people amongst them, though.
No question. I've had no dramas with any of them. They're very polite, but I sort of just think the balance isn't right at the moment.
For the young people who want jobs, who live on the island, exactly born and bred,
my main point is that.
Yeah, well, that is, mate. But as far as the ecosystem of the island and the waves of the island, do you think they're ever going to change, or is it just going to be... I know it changes, like the erosion at Point Lookout at the moment at Main Beach must be huge. The erosion there.
Yeah, we've copped a lot of sand movement at the moment. But the island actually heals itself so quickly after a big blow like this. It's always good to get a big blow. It's sort of like the worst part we actually get now, the amount of plastic that's washed up there, because where the bottom of the island is, where South Stradbroke join Jumping Pin Bar, we have the whole Logan River that empties out into that area. So every time we get a southerly wind and a big swell or a lot of rain, we end up with chocolate water, which is what the same as you get at Burleigh and everything. And coming out of the Tweed, it's just insane. It's just the amount of washed up plastic now, as I've never seen anything like it.
So do you do anything on the island? Like, do the local groups go and do some collection and stuff?
They've cleaned most of it already. We've got a lot of people there that had volunteer groups down there and all the rest of it. The council have been doing well and cleaned everything up after the big blow last week. But, the island just replenishes. Most of the sand that gets pumped into Snapper and gets driven north, we end up with it anyway, eventually.
Yeah, you get it sometimes. Mate, and also, mate, I've noticed the island has a beautiful connection with the Indigenous culture on the island. It's really good there that the connection the place have, and you all work together there.
It's something, Tap, that actually I'm very proud of, and I think it's actually only one of the many, very few places throughout Australia actually where I grew up as a small kid there growing up on the island. I was based in Dunwich, and I had more Indigenous friends than I had white friends, and put it in blunt words, and I never even looked at it, or it never even occurred to me. And still now, the elders now, and I'm one of the elders, on the other side. Yeah,
because I noticed that they call you Uncle Russ, which is an Indigenous term, a very compliment, an elder.
And I get called now Uncle Russ, and I sort of get a bit chuffed about that, actually.
Yeah, that is. It's a compliment.
And it's really good, because if there's any dramas, I have a situation, it's probably, I'll tell you my trick, Tap. If I see a carload of Coast Guys or Brizzos going for a surf or something, they got attitude problems, I paddle up to them and I say, look, guys, it's like this. I don't come into the, aggressive tactics. I say, you want a good holiday or a short holiday? And they asked me the question, what do you mean? And I said, well, we're going to have a short holiday or a good holiday. It's up to you and your attitude. And they sort of come, I'm not too sure. And then I have to explain it. And I said, if you don't pull your head in, I said, there's 25 kilometres there of beach. There's no one there. You can move down the beach 50 metres and or don't paddle up past the guys that are sitting here after every wave you get, thinking you're going to get it, or you can have a bad holiday. And they said, what do you mean by a bad holiday? And I says, if I go to the beach and ring up, I could get you an Indigenous escort back to the barge with a never return written across your forehead. And the look you get then, Tap, is quite extraordinary.
Well, you know what's funny too, I notice on the island? Everybody leaves their keys in their car. Like, because I was going, I think I had to do a power. I've got to park the car here. And they go, no worry, that's cool. And someone went, started the car, moved it, because if you steal a car, where are you going to take it?
It's a no-win situation, that one, because it still happens occasionally. Some of the guys actually have a big night out at the pub and they might borrow someone's car and they
to get home.
They got that on social media that night while they still had a few beers in them, and the next morning the cars arrived outside their place at 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, and they're, it's come back. But, you know, it is, because you can't. A small community, everybody's watching out for each other all the time, you know. It's way different, but it's the same thing. It's just trust, And, you know, there's times there where you still lock your cars up, like school holidays, Christmas holidays, things like that. But other times, you know, most of the time, and it's like I park my car where the lifeguards park their car, but most of the lifeguards know where my keys are anyway. So, you know, they just, if they need it, they'll take it.
And it is a beautiful place, North Stradbroke Island, mate. I think, you know, to grow up there, I always say, you know, like it's an amazing culture, like a small country town, but you're cut off from everywhere. Mate, it has been a pleasure talking to you, Russ, and I love every time I go up there, and when I'm on the radio and Burn Young accidentally says Stradbroke, and I go, no, South Straddie, Russ will be ringing me. But, mate, I love you having a chat with you, mate. It's been awesome to have you on the green room. Thank you.
Thanks, Tap. Much appreciated.
Cheers. Got to see this man surf, he rips. Thanks for tuning into The Green Room. A big thank you to our guests for sharing their stories and insights, our producer Sarah, and Podfire for bringing this podcast to life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a review, and share The Green Room with your friends. We'll catch you next time for more conversations with the legends of surf and beyond. Until then, catch you in the waves.